send you, but if you go to Android, you can still scan and it works.
Oh shit. I can't connect over the LAN.
Is
Vaguely. This seems like a pretty fast internet connection, so as long as it's like.
endeavor. You will not!
Hello and welcome for Lecture 8. Today we're joined by Charlie Cheever. Charlie did his undergrad at Harvard. He actually took CS50 back in the day and went on to join Facebook, later founded a website called Quora, and is now founded and leading the team over at Expo. So I will hand it over to him and he will do a lecture on Expo components. So welcome, Charlie.
Cool. Thanks, Jordan, and thanks for having me here. Cool. So I'm Charlie, and I'm going to talk to you about Expo today. I think most people in this class are already using it to build a lot of their projects and assignments for this class. So I'll talk a little bit more about what it is and then go into some detail about different parts of it that you can use that you might not have encountered yet. So what is Expo? Expo is basically two things. One is it's like a project and an effort that is basically like trying to take the spirit of the web and the ideas of the web and the accessibility and the distribution power and things like that, and fuse it with the sort of like functionality and gestures and animations and capabilities and look and feel that you get with like native mobile apps that like people like using on their phones. Because people used to use the web, and there are lots of people that can develop for the web, and that's probably the most popular development platform in the world. But it's really hard to develop for mobile, even though everyone in the world is carrying around their phones all the time now. And so then, as part of that, what Expo is, secondly, is basically like a standard library of components that let you access basically everything on your phone device through JavaScript, without having to worry about Xcode or Android Studio or libraries like that. And so when I say access everything on your phone through JavaScript, I mean basically all the hardware peripherals like accelerometer, gyroscope, GPS location, push notifications, things like that, along with like stuff on the screen like native maps, native video player, sound, those kind of things, camera. And then some common libraries that people need to use a lot of the time, like Facebook login, Google login, ads, things like that. So there's actually a ton of these things. You can see a whole list if you go to docs.expo.io. I'm going to go there like every 45 seconds probably during this lecture, but so just get familiar with these. And if you just scroll down on the left sidebar here, you can see a full list where accelerometer, AdMob, amplitude, app loading, like all these things are available. I'm only going to have time to show you some of them, but they all work pretty well and they're all tested. And so basically everything here is a combination of things that we've made at Expo as part of the project, along with like editorially selecting some of the best open source things out in the community, like vector icons, which is the most popular way to do icons in React Native, and React Native Maps, which originally was made at Airbnb, I think by this guy Leland Richardson, which is kind of universally the way that everyone does maps with React Native. So we've pulled in a few of those open source projects that are best of breed and that are kept up to date and maintained, and then built the things that there wasn't a great solution already. And so we're going to be using the Expo client on our phones, and we're going to use Snack a lot, which is at snack.expo.io, and also we're going to use XDE, the sort of desktop development tool and I tend to use VS Code for my editor. So the first thing we're going to dive into is maps and location. I'm just going to build a really simple demo of using maps and then throwing a couple pins on it and showing where we are and stuff like that. So to do this, I'm going to go into Snack, which you can get to at snack.expo.io. And this is just basically the default project. I made a few changes here. I'll just start from scratch so people can follow along more easily. I'm going to reload this. And I'm going to change this constants thing here to just import Expo. I'm going to delete this import asset example and import card because we don't need those. And then I'm just going to delete all this stuff in here and then change this to expo.constants. So now I just have a plain view. So I'm not even going to use that plain view. I'm actually just going to do expo.mapView. And then I'm going to do run device so I can take a look at this thing on my phone. So I'm opening this up. I'm using an iPhone so I can mirror it here. And so here's what this looks like now. It just looks like a white screen. So I will try, actually, I'm going to get rid of files. And I'm going to shrink this a little bit and try to move this over here. Maybe we'll be able to see it then. I'd like to be able to see both at the same time. So I'm going to minimize a lot of these windows. Ooh. All right, I had a lot of windows open. Really a lot of windows open. OK, there we go. Now we can see both at the same time. So part of why this map view isn't showing up is that it's too small and it's sort of like just not showing up because it's not big enough. So we'll say flex 1 under style. And then now, bam, a map view appears. And it's taking up the whole screen. That's kind of what we want. So one side note here is this is an Apple map because I'm using an iPhone. On an Android phone, this would be a Google map. But Google Maps is also available for iPhone. And so you can switch the provider if you want. So I can say provider equals expo.mapview.provider Google. And now this is using a Google map. And you can see it says Google in the corner. And Google Maps default to, I think, somewhere in the UK, like probably Greenwich Meridian or something like that, whereas Apple Maps defaults to the United States. We'll use Apple Maps for the rest of this demo, but you can switch between them pretty easily. So I'm going to take a look at the maps documentation here, just so we have a good reference point to start. And if you look here, you can see the first thing it shows is a simple example. And I have a way to set an initial region, which would be pretty useful because looking at a giant map of the United States isn't that interesting in a lot of cases. So I'm just going to copy this and bring it over here and paste it in here. And now you can see this makes this initial region like in San Francisco. Some of you might be in San Francisco if you're watching on stream. But we're actually in Cambridge right now. So it would be great if we could center the map there or wherever we actually are. And so what I'm going to do is actually use the location API to figure out where we are and then center the map on that. And so what we're going to do is slip over the documentation and take a look at location. You can see the first thing it says here is that you need to use the permissions API to get permission to ask for location. If you're used to using an app on your phone that asks for a location, you probably have seen these dialogues pop up that say, like, you know, Facebook Messenger would like to use your location, like OK or cancel. And you can only get one shot as an app to ask for that permission. So a lot of apps will like pre-ask you and ask for permission to ask permission for your location, and then If you don't say OK, they won't ask you, so because they don't want to use their one chance. In the Expo client app here, I've actually already asked for location permission. It's been granted, so we won't see the dialog pop up. But if it was the first time, or if you're in like a standalone app or something like that, we do want to ask for permission. So we'll cover that here. And asking for permission again using the Expo permissions API is fine because it'll just say, oh, you already have permission and it's granted. So I'm going to write a little method here that's called ask for location permission async. And I'm going to just call this like get location async. So I'm going to ask for permission first. So the first thing I'm going to do is say let status equals await expo.permissions.ask async expo.permissions.location. I can see a list of all the permissions I can ask for if I go to the permissions page on the Expo docs. You can see here's this Expo permissions get async, and then type is the argument it takes. It's just a string. And you can see a complete list if you scroll down here. So location, camera, audio recording, contacts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The one we're interested in here is expo.permissions.location, because we're going to ask for location. So that's right. But one thing I made as a mistake is that this is actually needs to be an async function because we want to await stuff. So I'm going to say equals async and then make it an arrow function. This is a good way to make async functions as class methods, or as instance methods in your classes. So now we need to check the status. The typical pattern with the Expo permissions API is basically to ask for permission and then say if status doesn't equal granted, then sort of log an error or show an error. And here we'll just return, but in a more fully featured application, you might want to like show an error message or force the users to another flow or whatever. Here we'll just jump out and not do anything. And then the next thing we'll do is we'll say, OK, we're going to ask for the location. So I can go back to the location page in the docs. And I can see that the way we do this is we use location get current position async. And this takes bracket as an argument. So let's figure out what that means. This is an options array, and it can take enable high accuracy or maximum age. We don't really need to do anything special because we're just trying to get generally what location we're in. And so we're just not going to give any options. But I think that it requires giving the options thing as an empty object. Enable high accuracy is nice because it gives you higher accuracy, but it also uses more battery on phones. So unless you actually need that accuracy, you generally shouldn't use it. So what we'll say here is say let location equals await expo.location get current position async, I think it was. And then, so now if this happens, we should get a location. So I'm going to check, I'm going to log it as soon as I get it. That way we can sort of inspect what we get. So for that to happen, I need to call this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say on component did mount, which is a React lifecycle method that you're probably familiar with. I'm going to say this dot get location async. So this will call this method as soon as the component mounts. So now, since I changed this in the snack reloaded, it's already done this. So now I can see this object here has a timestamp and then also has chords. And inside chords is a latitude, an altitude, a longitude, heading, an accuracy, an altitude accuracy estimate, and a speed estimate. We're not going, since we're not moving at all, it doesn't have any concept of our speed, so it says speed -1. And since we're not moving at all, heading is also -1, which is sort of an error value. And so what we're going to do is use those chords from that object to populate the initial place of our map. But the thing is in our render method, right now we're rendering the map view and we're sticking in the initial region right away, but we don't get the location until shortly afterwards when we're able to have component did mount fire, and then we check the permissions, which is asynchronous, and then we ask the GPS for the location, and then we pull this information out. So we aren't quite ready right off the bat when the application starts to show the map with an initial location where we are. So we're going to have to do something using state to make that work. So we're going to say state location null to start. I'm just adding this as an initial way to set state. And then here, instead of logging the location, what I'll do is I'll say this.setState location. This, if you're not familiar with this syntax here, this is just a shorthand for saying location : location. I'll use that a couple of times because it's a pretty convenient shorthand. This little brackets button that says prettier in the lower right-hand corner that I keep hitting, it just reformats the code so it's easier to read, and when I make indenting mistakes and stuff like that, it takes care of those. So now, when this component mounts, it should call getLocation async, and that should set state, once it's ready, to be an actual location. So now I don't want to show the map. I'm just going to show a blank screen until we have the location ready. So I'm going to do here in the render method is say if this.state.isReady. Actually, I'm not going to use this ready. I'm going to say location. If no location, then return an empty view. Otherwise, we'll have a location that we can populate. So that means if the code makes it down to this part, this.state.location has a value in it that will have chords. So I'll say this.state.location.chords.latitude. And then now you can see this is already updated. Now that I've changed the latitude but not the longitude, I'm on some highway in the middle of America somewhere. Let's zoom out and see exactly where that is. Looks like Oregon. So the north-south is now correct, but I need to change the longitude to move it over to Cambridge where we are. So I'll just change that to this.state.location.chords.longitude. And now you can see the map now is centered on Cambridge, which is pretty cool because that's where we are. And if you're following along and you did this, in Bulgaria or something, the map should be centered on Bulgaria for you as long as your GPS is working. So it's normal if you see something different if you're not in the same place. Cool. So this is cool that this map is centered on us, but I think a lot of times when you really want to get your bearings on a map, you want to have a pin that says, hey, you're here. So let's add a marker to this map that shows where we are. Clear these logs, shrink this down a little bit. So if I go look at the maps documentation, you can see this is built by Airbnb. And so the documentation basically says, for full documentation, go check out Airbnb React Native Map. So let's go over there. And then under Component API, you can see it has map view, which we already are using, marker, callout, polygon, polyline, circle, and overlay. Some of these are pretty fancy and would take a long time to go into detail on, but marker is really simple. So let's just start putting a marker on the map. You can see this isn't too complicated. It basically just has a whole bunch of props you can add, and then some things you can call on it. We'll just use the most simple props in general, which are sort of title, description, pin color, and coordinate. Coordinate is how we'll set where the marker is, and then pin color is self-explanatory, and then title and description, I'll show you how they show up. So it's pretty easy to put a marker on the map. You just make, instead of the map view being sort of a singleton component, you just make it a component that has things inside of it. And then we'll say expo.mapview.marker. Now we need to give a coordinate for the marker so it shows up. So we'll say coordinate equals this.state.location.chords. Coordinate just requires latitude and longitude, but this object has those, so it's OK that it has other things as well. So now you can see over here, we have a dot right in the center of the map where we are. That's pretty cool. If I zoom in, it's right there, and you can sort of see we're actually at Radcliffe College, which is actually where we are. Pretty cool. So now we might want to say that what that means. So we'll sort of say title equals you are here. OK, cool. So now, after that reloads, when I tap on that marker, it now says you are here, which is pretty useful. This is somewhat useful to know, but we might also want to have some other things on the map. So like when I went to school here, I lived in a dorm called Elliott House. And so it would be kind of cool to be able to put that on this map. And so there probably is a way to do that. So I know that the address of Elliott House is like 101 Dunster Street. But I don't really know how to put a map view at 101 Dunster Street because if you look at the map marker API, it takes a coordinate, which is latitude and longitude. And so we need some way to go from an address to the latitude and longitude. And what we can use for that is this Expo API under location called geocoding. So if you go to location in the docs, and you scroll down a little bit, after the stuff about getting position, there's something called geocode async, which takes an address as a string and then will return some guesses at the lat long based on like where you are and how popular different places are and things like that. So we can try just putting in 101 Dunster Street and seeing if that works. So I'll do that here. While we're getting location, once we do that, I'm going to actually ask here for the place information as well. So I'm going to say let Elliott House equal await expo dot location dot geocode async 101 Dunster Street. Now I'm just going to log this just so we can see what we get back. Let me see if I have other log statements that are getting in the way. No, looks like I don't. So I can see what I get back. Here is it's an array, and the first element has a latitude and a longitude and accuracy. So that is, that's actually something else. All right, let me clear these. So now, if I do that, am I doing this wrong? Oh, wait, no, it's not. So the latitude and longitude of this Elliott House is 42.3707463, and longitude is -71.1209627. So now we have to pull this out of being the first element of the array and somehow put it as a marker in the map. So I'm going to do this, use parentheses here, and then take the 0 index. So now when I scroll down, now there's no array wrapping this, and it's just a raw object that has a latitude and a longitude. And I'll add some other places too. So I'll say the Crimson, which is the student newspaper, is at 14 Plimpton Street, I think. And then Kitty is at 2 Holyoke Place. So then I'm going to set places in state also. So I'll just say Elliott House, the Crimson, and Kitty. So now if I do prettier here, that should work. And so now I should be able to put additional markers here for those places. Map view marker coordinate equals this dot state dot places dot Elliott House. Title equals Elliott House. Description equals Domus. So now I can see here's where we are. You're here. And then I can also see Elliott House. There's Domus. So to make this map look a little clearer, I'm going to actually make this pin blue. And so now Elliott House is more clearly marked. And then I'll mark the other spots on the map as well. Since this is pretty much the same thing, I'm just going to copy paste this and change the appropriate stuff. So this is going to be the Crimson, pin color, Crimson. I wonder if that works. And I'll make the coordinate of where we are be yellow, just so that stands out. OK, well, that's hard to see. We'll use green instead for where we are. Cool. So now, as long as I change these, crimson, student newspaper, now I have a couple different places here. And if I zoom in, it'll show me the description of all of them as I tap them. And I can also see where I am. Since when I change this code and it zooms back to the original zoom distance, all these things are kind of clustered in the center, and I'm zoomed out too far. I actually want to make the map zoomed in a little more by default. So I'm going to change this latitude delta and longitude delta a little bit. These values that I copied from the example are pretty reasonable, but they're just a little bit too big. So we want to zoom in about like maybe double. So I'm going to do divided by 2 for both of these and see what happens. So now it's zoomed in a bit more. Let me see what happens if I do 3, if that looks better or worse. That looks a little better, but now these buildings are so close to the edge that we might want to not be quite that much. Let's just do 2.5. OK, that looks pretty good to me. That way I don't have to keep zooming in every time I make this. So then the last thing I'll do is we might want to know where we are instead of just saying we're here or whatever. So actually I can use an API called reverse geocoding to take coordinates and turn them into like an address or something like that. So what I'll do is I'll say let where equal await expo.location.reverse geocode async location.coords. So this is going to find the coordinates of where we are and then do a reverse geocode lookup on them. And then I'll log this just to see what's going on. Clear this. And then now I can see it's giving an array, and then it has a bunch of metadata. And I'll just use the name from that. So I'll also take the 0 index of this, just like I did with those other things that came in an array. And then here, instead, where I don't have a description, I'll just say description equals this.state.where.name. So now, when I tap on the green pin here, it should say you are here, Radcliffe College. Or if you're in some other location, it'll probably say where you are based on the reverse geocode lookup. So now we have the beginnings of a map-based application based on using the maps and geolocation APIs. So that's pretty fun and cool. So now I'm going to move on to the next thing. This is text or delete, which is something my sister sometimes does with me. She's a millennial, and so she plays this game where you have to go to the contacts app on your phone and spin through it until you find, and then close your eyes and then stop on a random contact. And then you have to decide whether you're going to text that person right then or you're just going to delete them from your phone. And so I thought it would be interesting to make an app that would go through your contacts and do this. It's not actually that fun of a game in real life. It's mostly stressful. But we can make a way to do it. So I'm starting again with a fresh snack. I'll make the change again to just import Expo here instead of that constants thing. I'll delete this stuff and then delete this stuff as well. And then I have to change this to expo.constants because I got rid of that. So the first thing I need to do is do something kind of similar where, I'm just going to make a button that'll pick a random contact. That'll be the first thing I do. So import, oops, it looks like I deleted the import from React Native line by accident. So I'm going to import button so that I can use that. And now I'm going to just say button title equals pick a random contact. onPress equals pressed. All right, so I'm just going to make a button that when you press it, it says pressed. So now I'm going to open this. OK, so now we have this button here. When I tap this, it says pressed. OK, so we have a button that works. Cool. So now when we hit the button, we want to open your contacts and get a random contact. So I'm going to do is get random contact async equals async. So now I've got to go back to the docs and look up contacts. This needs permissions, actually, for your contacts. And so if you look at the example here, it awaits in basically the same way that we did before. So I'm just going to type that really quickly. Let status equals await expo.permissions.ask async expo permissions.contacts if status doesn't equal granted console.error. And we'll just bail. Otherwise, we're going to then call, now that we have permissions, we can call into the contacts API. If we look at this, there's a method called getContactsAsync, and it takes some options. The most naive implementation of this would just get all your contacts and return them in like a series of nested data structures like lists and objects. But some people have like thousands of contacts on their phone. And so, especially for like older Android phones and things like that, it can take a really long time to like read those off the place where they're stored and then serialize them and put them in memory and copy them over. And so you don't really want to have these clunky applications where maybe they aren't even sure you need all the contacts, but the app gets really slowed down because it's loading all this stuff in. And so there's other ways to load in stuff, like either paginated or by ID. So you can see in the object options here, there's this page size and page offset. And so let's just see what happens if we do a default request, like if we don't give any options. So let contacts equals await expo.contacts, what is it? Get contacts async. And we just won't give any options. But we'll log what the answer is. And we'll stop saying pressed. And we'll just say this dot get random contact async. So now when I push this button, I was hoping something would happen, but it didn't. So now I'm just going to make sure I'm getting to here and not having permissions not granted. OK, so it's not getting my contacts. So why not? Maybe I need to actually fill out the options. So fields, page size, and page offset. So page size, let's just try 1 and offset 0. And fields, we will say phone numbers. OK. So now we've got some data. So the first contact is Jack Freese on my phone. Has next page, has previous page, and it says I have 1,816 total contacts. So what I'm actually going to do is use the fact that it's giving me the total and then use that to pick a random one, because I'll just pick a random number between 1 and 816, or however many contacts I have on the phone. So what I'll do here is I'll await that, and then I'll say let total equal contacts to pull that out from it. Then I'll say we'll let n equal like a random number between 1 and total, or between 0 and total minus 1 rather. And then we'll log that number. So now I should see a log every time I push this button of a number between 0 and 815. So that seems like it's working. So now I just have to fetch that random person. So I'll say let random contact equal await get contacts async page size 1 offset n fields phone numbers. And now I'll log this random contact and see if I get a random contact. So I'm going to clear this so I can see what's going on. So it looks like I got something. I got Jack Freese, which seems weird because that was the random thing I got last time. So I might be doing something wrong. Maybe the offset isn't working, or maybe I need to do page size n, offset 0. And then we'll get a whole bunch of contacts and we'll be able to look at the last one. So now I got 797, but I think it's loading almost all of my contacts into memory and trying to put them all into a data structure, so it might take too long. So that might not work. And what if we don't ask for any phone numbers or anything? Okay, so now I got 10 things. I think it's going to make me ask for each page of them. Now I'll just choose 100. So it looks like I'm going to have to get all of the pages of stuff to make this work. So just in the interest of time, I'm not going to write this loop, but I'm just going to pick a random one between 1 and 100 and pick that out. And we'll just pretend I only have 100 contacts. And so from here, I think under let data equals random contacts, let C equals data n. So now I picked a random contact from the first 100 people on my phone, and it actually picked David Malin's sister, Lauren Malin. That's kind of funny. And so it's basically working. So now I just need to get phone numbers. So now I'm going to put phone numbers back in the fields here, and now I'll try again. And is it giving me his phone number? Maybe I don't have it. Well, I guess I'll just make do without having phone numbers. Or I'll check the documentation to make sure that was right. Phone numbers. This is actually not a string. It's supposed to be expo.contacts.phone numbers. OK. So now I'll do this again. And someone named Steven, and I guess I don't have a phone number for him, actually. Oh, I did this wrong because I took this here. OK, so now it has phone numbers, but I'm not going to show you people's phone numbers here. But now I'm getting the phone numbers. And so then I'm going to do a set state here now that I have a contact. See, and then here, I'll just show their name if I have one. So I'll just say this dot state dot random contact and text this dot state dot random contact dot name. Or no. is not an object. Random contact. So now I just have to set an initial value for random contact and state. So then when I do set state here, it's already populated and that can actually be checked here. So now when I pick a random contact, it shows me someone named Tom Cook. If I hit it again, now it says Jonas Luster, Elizabeth Windrum. These are just random people from my phone. And so I think with future work, you could find a way to make that a link that would then send a text message, or like put you in the texting app or take you to the contacts app, depending on what you choose. But I'm going to move on to other things. Cool. Window. So now I'm going to show you making a quick compass. I'm going to make a new snack. And I'm again just going to delete this junk and just say Expo here. Say constants, expo.constants there, and then get rid of this stuff. And then run on device, Android, open this up. So now one of the cool things that a phone has that like computers don't normally have or whatever is like a compass in them. Like it's called a magnetometer formally. And so we're going to look at the API here for it. And it's really, really simple to use. You can say basically like Expo magnetometer add listener, and we'll just do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to upload some files really quickly that should make our life easier. So I'm going to upload this compass face, and I'm going to include this compass needle. Files. So now I'm just going to say image and image background we're going to import here, and I'm just going to draw a simple compass on the screen here that we can actually turn into a real compass. So I'm going to say image background source equals require compass face that I just uploaded to this project. And that is, I think, height 320, width 320. And then I'm going to have a compass needle here inside of it. And then, okay, so now this looks almost right, but the needle isn't really centered on the compass. So I'm going to say align items center, justify content center. I'm going to make this needle a little bit transparent. I'm going to say opacity 0.65. Bam. Now we have a compass that's like looking pretty good, except that I can move my phone around in different directions and nothing happens. So now I'm going to use the magnetometer to make it actually function like a compass. So this is pretty easy. So I'm going to say state is ready, false, and it just won't be ready until then. And then I'm going to say component did mount this dot set up magnetometer async. Set up magnetometer async equals an async function. And then looking at the magnetometer docs, all I need to do is add a listener here. So I'm going to add a listener, and this just takes a function. Oops. And we'll just say this is like a vector. So we'll just have that say this state v for that vector. Okay, cool. And so now there's a little bit of math you need to do to turn that into something. So we'll just see what the vector thing is. Text this state v text. Objects are not. So now I'm showing what V is on the screen here, and you can see it's got like X, Y, and Z components here to it. And so we somehow need to turn that into a directional heading. And you can actually like Google around and find out how to do that. Making a compass. I think I can remember it off the top of my head though. I think it's something like let theta equals 0 radians. If this dot state dot v theta equals math dot a10 negative vx. Well, let's say let x, y, z. We'll pull x, y, and z out of the vector, and then we'll do this. If negative greater than 0 and y is greater than 0, then nothing. Else if y is greater than 0, theta plus equals math dot pi, else theta plus equals math dot pi times 2. And then okay, so now instead of showing the vector, I'm going to try showing the angle in radians. And you can see as I move it, that changes. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to try to rotate the needle so that it like turns that many degrees. And what we can do for that is we can just use this transform thing, which takes a property like rotate, I think, or a rotation. Let me look that up. Yep. Under transforms in the React Native docs, you can see it does rotation. And so I'm just going to say rotation theta. And maybe it's rotate. Oh, yeah, OK. So now you can see, it's maybe hard to tell on the screen at the same time, but now as I move, I think I made a mistake somewhere, but because the thing flips around sometimes. But in general, you basically have like a working compass now. So that's pretty cool. Another thing is there's actually like a whole bunch of sensors on the phone. There's not just the magnetometer, but there's an accelerometer, a gyroscope, a pedometer, GPS, and a camera and things like that. And so you can actually combine all these things and like get more information, because some of them collect overlapping information, or you can combine it together and you can be pretty smart about it. And so that whole study of that is called like sensor fusion. And there's sort of a standardized output from that that's called like device motion that has been exposed on like in iOS APIs and also in Android APIs. And so if you use device motion, you can actually get information about the orientation of a phone that's like from the combination of all these different sensors. And that's actually exposed in Expo as well. So we can do kind of a cool demo if we do something where we could even just take this and, well, I'll start I'll just take out this stuff, and instead of this, I'll just put in an image. I'm going to upload, let me show the files here, and I'll upload these balloons. Get rid of the files. So I just uploaded some balloons. Now I'm going to show them. And I'm going to say source equals require uphouse.jpg. Style equals, how big is that thing? 1440 by 1280. And then let's multiply it by like 0.7, just so that it's like vaguely fitting on the screen. Cool. So now we have this house. But now, instead of using like compass stuff, let's use device motion instead. So instead of setting up the magnetometer, let's set up device motion. And the way we do that, we can take a look at this and say, we just add a listener, and we'll get something else. But it's pretty similar. Device motion, add listener, device motion, this. We'll just call it what the output of device motion listener is, DM for device motion. So we'll set that state. And then instead of doing all this junk to get theta, we'll just say let angle equals, we'll just say let angle equals 0 if this dot state dot dm and this dot state dot dm dot rotation dot gamma, and rotation, we'll say angle equals this dot state dot dm dot rotation dot gamma. Okay, and then we'll do a rotation transform on this, just like we did before. And let's see. We need to set up the device motion. Now if we do this, then let me log what we're getting here. All right, we're not getting anything listened from device motion. Why is that not the case? Oh, device motion is actually under danger zone, which is called danger zone because the API might change and it's sort of in beta. It's safe to use, but like if you want to keep using it, you might have to like learn new stuff when new things come out. I forgot that, and I forgot to put in the danger zone thing, and that's why it's not working right now. But I need to do to fix that is say danger zone here, and then I probably don't need this log. But now you can see as I rotate this, the balloons are kind of spinning around like crazy. What I'm trying to do is actually make them always point up. So you can see what I'm doing is when I tilt it, it actually rotates even further. So what I want to do instead is compensate and actually have it be the opposite of that. So I'm going to rotate it by the negative of the rotation of the device. So if I do that, then now if you see this, like no matter how I rotate my phone, the balloons are always kind of going up in the air. It's a little choppy. And so what we can actually do is we can tell the device motion sensor to detect every frame. So we can say expo dot danger zone device motion set update interval to 16. That's the other method you can see here, set update interval. The reason we do 16 is that iPhones and Android phones tend to render stuff at like 60 frames per second, which is like pretty good for viewing the human eye. There's one model of new iPad that renders at like 120 frames per second, but almost all sort of modern phones do 60 frames per second now when they can. When they drop frames, it's like a miss, and that's when you see jerkiness in your UI and stuff. So if you divide 1,000 milliseconds by 60 frames, you end up with like 16 milliseconds. And so that's why we use 16 here, because that means we'll get an update from the device motion API every frame. So when we do this, now if you can tell, like this is really smooth because it's updating every single frame. And even though it looks not like it on the screen, on my phone, the balloons are always pointing up. Cool. So we'll take a little break for a while, and then I'll come back and do some more stuff. Thanks. Unless there's any questions. Hey, welcome back. There was one side note, somebody asked about this. I kind of glossed over it, but in the when you add those listeners for device motion or for magnetometer, you should actually remove them when your component unmounts. Otherwise, you can accumulate lots of these listeners that aren't doing anything, that are wasting resources or keeping the device running and wasting battery. So just calling this remove all listeners or storing the value of add listener and then calling remove on that is how you do that. But in a basic demo application or something like that, it's not the end of the world. It's sort of like just not cleaning up after yourself. So the next thing we're going to do is do some multimedia stuff. This is something that people always like doing, is stuff with like video, images, audio, stuff like that. So I'm going to make a basic, what I call a multimedia board. Basically, the idea is like just sort of one of those soundboards, like people made Arnold Schwarzenegger soundboards or The Office soundboards or Snoop Dogg soundboards. I'm going to do the same thing, but with videos instead. So what I've got, I'll just start by showing a quick CAD video. What I'm going to use here is just a text editor. I'm using VS Code, but you can use whatever one. And I'm going to use the Expo XDE instead of Snack, because the way Snack does reloading when you use videos, especially and audio stuff, having all the multimedia objects plus that kind of reloading tends to just overload the phone and it just kind of breaks. So it's going to work better to do this way. So I've got it opened up here. Here's the app, and then here's my editor. I'm going to close these and move this over, minimize this and this, so we can see the phone as we type. OK, and now I'm just going to say, just as a test, I'm going to delete this and just say cat sounds. Save it, and then this should reload. It takes a little longer because we're not using Snack, because it's downloading this whole bundle. All right, but it worked. Cool. So now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stick in a cat video. So we're going to say video expo.video. Let's look up the docs for this, just so we have somewhere to start. And you can see there's a bunch of options that it takes, but they're pretty basic. And so we can just start by just saying source require / I think, let me look at this directory. So I have an assets folder, and inside it I have a font and 9 little short videos of cats plus some weird sound effects. So here's one of them. So I'm going to try to play that one. So I'm going to say require assets 1.mp4. And then I'm going to give this a style. So I'm going to say, just so we can see it, width 400, height 400. OK, and we'll just close that like that. And now if I save this, I think we should, made a mistake. Oops, I forgot this. Closing bracket. Cool. So now I have a cat video here, but it's not playing, and it's just right there. So now I'm going to switch this to say should play equals true. I think that's right. Looking at this, yeah, OK. Save this. So now the video plays. OK, cool. There's a couple things that aren't great about this. One is like I can't hear any sound. So part of this is that my phone's on silent right now, actually. So one thing I can do is I can turn my phone off silent, which I just did. And I'm going to save this again so that it loads up again. And now I think we should hear the sound. Yeah, OK, so the sound played, but I don't want to have to always turn on my phone to not silent just to hear this stuff, because if I'm going into this app, half the point is to like hear the sounds. So we can actually switch the audio mode so that it'll play while the phone is on silent. And the way we do that is if we look at the docs under audio, set audio. We can actually set it up. So I'll just write a method here that's like and I'll say Expo audio oops, import Expo from Expo. Okay. Set audio mode async, and then this is going to take some parameters. So one thing it's going to take is play in silent mode on iOS. So we're going to set this to true. And we'll await this. So now we're going to say component will mount this dot set audio mode async. Okay, so now I think if I save this, this should play even though my phone is back in silent mode. Audio mode attempted without the required keys. So I need to fill in more keys. So allows recording iOS false because we're not going to record anything. If you want to watch the basketball championship game, it's on right now. So you can come watch this on video later. Should duck Android, true. Interruption mode Android, Expo, audio. Interruption mode Android, duck others. Interruption mode iOS, Expo, audio. Interruption iOS, mix with others. Don't worry too much about what all these things are, because you can just kind of copy these. And then when you want to start doing very particular things with audio, you can kind of like learn what they are. They're basically about like if there's another sound playing in the background, like if you had Spotify playing music, then like how should your app interact with that? Should it like stop the music temporarily and then do stuff, or should it just play over it, et cetera, et cetera? And you can look through the docs to find out what these are. But hopefully this is enough that by saving this, this will now work. Okay. There we go. So now the sound played. Cool. So now the other thing is I kind of want all these videos to be sort of square buttons. And so I said height 400, width 400. But you can see that like it's kind of a rectangle-y type thing. So what I can do here is I can say cover mode. It's resize mode rather. Equals, and I can say cover. And that will cause this to make the video fill the space that I give it in the style. And so now I should see a square video now. And I do. Cool. And so now I want to make it so that when this video gets to the end, it's not a black square, which is boring and doesn't look right, but it actually goes back to the first frame of the video. And so the way I do that is I actually have to listen for when it's actually fairly complicated to do this, but I have to basically like listen for when the video ends, get a callback, and then reset the frame position of it. And so to even start doing that, I need to use refs and stuff. So I'm actually going to break this out into its own component. So I'm going to make a new one called cat video button extends React component. And this has a render method, which is just going to be this. And I'm going to say this props width, or this props size, or 400. This props height, or this props size, or 400. Okay, and I'm going to say this props source for this so that I can parameterize this and use it for all the different ones that I want, all the different cat video buttons. So I'm just going to throw cat video button source equals require assets 1.mp4 and we'll say it's just 100 now. So if this works, I should see a smaller cat button. There we go. Perfect. So now I'm going to try to make this so that it goes back to the first thing. So I'm going to have to make a ref here, which is, I think you probably covered this. But basically, like, this takes a function that's passed the component itself, and then you can do something to, you can, like, in this component, set a variable that's a reference to this component. So like inside the cat video button, I'm going to have an instance variable that points to the Expo video that is the actual cat video. And so this dot video equals C. C is for component here. OK. So then there's this callback called on playback status update. And that's going to get playback status update. And if it has this did just finish property, it means it just finished. So I'm only interested in that. So I'm not going to write, I'm only going to write this if status did just finish part of the code. And I'm just going to have this function do nothing otherwise. But what we want to do here is we want to kind of reset the video. Reset async equals async function that says this video, we're going to say await this dot video, stop async. If I look at the video API, I can see that I can call stop async on it, which does what you think it does. It just stops the video. And then I'm going to say set position async to 0, which is the beginning of the video, because set position async takes one parameter that's a number of milliseconds into the video to play from. So 0 is the very beginning. The reason I have to call stop async is that if I just call set position async at the end of the video playing, on either Android or iOS, I forget which one, the video is actually not fully stopped playing when did just finish fires. And so it'll reset the position, and it'll think, oh, I still have a bunch to play, and it'll continue playing in a loop. So I'm going to call stop just to make sure that doesn't happen and be safe. So now, if I call this here, then if I just say this reset async, and save that, then now the video should play, and then it should go back to the first frame where you sort of see that smiley cat. And there we go. You can't see his face, but the cat's back. So now, what I want to do is make it so when I touch this, it like plays that again. So now I'm going to have to put some sort of touchable area on it. So I'm going to add touchable highlight here of the things that I import. And I'm going to say, this is a view that's wrapping this. And then I'm going to say, view here. And then I'm going to use a touchable highlight here. The reason for this inner view is that touchable highlights and things like that need like a React Native view and not an Expo video view, because they get confused about refs and things like that. So that's just like a general thing, is like if weird things are breaking around touchable highlight or very native components like video players and things like that, then just try adding in intermediate views, and that might fix your problems in some cases. So now I'm just going to capture the presses here on this touchable highlight area, and then just say, I'm going to log that press the cat. So I can just test this. OK. So now it's downloading. And I can see as I press it, the highlight shows up, but let me just make sure that the log that says press the cat shows up every time I press it. So now I just have to make it play again. So now I'm just going to add another method called play async. And it's going to say await this dot video replay async. Which is documented in the AV function, I guess, in the AV. But basically, this will replay the item from position 0. So that's a pretty good thing to use. So now we'll just say, when you press this, instead of logging that, I'm going to say this dot play async. Cool. So now, if I go look at this, once this loads, now when I press it, it should replay again. So I can just keep doing this over and over and over again. And if I press in the middle of it playing, it'll go back to the beginning and play it then. Cool. So now I just have to put together a whole bunch of these. But before I do that, I kind of want to make this look a little better. So what I'm actually going to do is say, let's make the background of this green. So I'm going to change this background color from FFF to green. And I'm going to change this text color here to yellow. And I make it kind of big. And let's see how that looks. OK, that looks a little bit interesting. But I kind of want a different font, because I don't like the way that font looks with this color scheme. So the way you can use different fonts is I can actually use like files like TTF files or OTF files as like custom fonts that I can just like load into the app on the fly. So let's do that now. So I sort of showed you that I put in some MP4 files. I also put in this Cooper Black regular font. You can just take a look at what that looks like in this preview. It looks like this. That's pretty nice looking. So to use that, what we have to do is we have to load in the font to begin with. So we're going to make a method that loads in these fonts. And that's pretty easy. You just do Expo font load async, and then it takes a map, and you can just say Cooper Black regular require assets Cooper Black regular.ttf. And then this will load load that font into the font sort of dictionary under Cooper Black regular. But to have it render properly, we have to have the font loaded before we show this text. So we're going to use a technique where we use state to keep track of whether it's loaded or not. So we're going to say is ready false here in state. And then in this render method of this whole thing, I'm going to say if not this.state is ready, return app expo.apploading. This app loading thing is just like a sort of a splash screen that will show until your app is loaded. And so this is just a convenience way to like show something that's like looks like your app and like while it's getting ready. Like if I switch into something like Facebook, you can see for a split second it shows like the scaffolding of Facebook. Same thing if I go into like Yelp, we'll probably do that. Yelp just shows the Yelp logo on a red screen. So the app loading container is basically just like a way to show something like that, which you can configure in your app.json and things like that. But we're just going to show that until the font is ready. So that'll execute when the state is not ready. But the rest of the time, we'll render the video board. So now we have multiple things to do before everything works. So we're going to say await promise.all this dot set audio mode async, this dot load fonts async. And then once those are done, now I'm going to put this into an async method. Oops. Then I can say this dot set state is ready true. So it's going to set up the audio mode and load the fonts, and then it should be ready. So then, OK, let's see if this works. Everything seems in order. But now I have to actually use the font that I set up instead of just loading it. So I'm going to say font family, Cooper, black, regular. And let's see if that worked. Now this should not display until the font is actually loaded into the program's memory. Bam. So now this looks basically right. But you can also see that like the cat sounds thing showed up, but then it took like a little while for the video to show up. And so we can actually preload the videos as well and make sure that they're loaded in as well. So we can say like load videos async. We'll say and await expo.asset load async, and then basically you can just pass in a bunch of require things in here and it'll work. And this will load these and then return when they're all loaded, or basically downloaded from the internet or ready. The way that Expo works is that everything is loaded over the air, so that you can load things like you can make changes to your app without resubmitting a binary, et cetera, et cetera. And so all assets work either when they're already on the device or when they're not. And so this load async thing will make sure all of these things are downloaded from the internet before it fires. So I'm going to say 789, and so then in setup, I'm going to say I want to load assets as well. So now I'll do all these steps before it says it's ready. And so there's still another step, even after the video is downloaded, of getting it prepared to show on the screen and stuff like that. So it won't be totally instant, but it should be a little bit snappier and a little bit less janky when I do this now. OK, now I'm just going to add like 9 of these. Flex direction row, put 3 of these in a row. And I'm going to make this 2 and 3. And then I'm actually going to add a margin here, I think. Come on. So now I have 3 videos all going at once, but they're all squinched together, so that's why I'm adding this margin. So now that basically seems like it's working, so I'm going to just format this. I'm going to copy this 3 times so I can just add the other videos. Now I should have a fully functioning video board, if I'm not mistaken. So now whenever I tap any of these things, they should work, and I can make all kinds of funny noises and things like that. Cool. Well, I think if you run this on older Androids, or actually a lot of different Androids, sometimes having 9 different videos on the screen at once will overwhelm it. I think that like the video library can probably be improved to make that not blow things up. But in the short term, you probably need to make this only a 3-entry video board or something to have it work on Android, unfortunately. Cool. You can also do stuff with sounds instead of just videos. I won't show that here, but it's the methods and everything for dealing with sounds and videos are very, very similar in Expo. Like the same person made both of those things and tried to make the APIs as similar as possible. So things like replay async and stop async and those kind of methods all work. The main difference is that you end up like, there isn't like a visual manifestation of the sound component. You just have like an abstract object in JavaScript memory that you control. Sort of similar to the like this._video reference that we ended up making by doing the ref thing here. But sound is basically just as easy. So what I'm going to show next is I'm going to try to do a little bit of stuff with photos. So I'm going to go back into doing a snack for that. And minimize this. Open this in Expo. And then there's a couple different ways you can do photos. I'm going to do the same thing here where I import from Expo, get rid of this stuff. And then get rid of that. OK, so now I can do something where I use the camera roll in the camera. So the first thing I'm going to do is just show an image, just because that's a good starting point. So I'm going to let's see, I'm going to take these dogs, and I'm going to do view style equals flex direction row image source equals require Mabel Toby. Okay. Unexpected token. Okay, so now I have 2 pictures of dogs here that I'm just going to put in place just to start playing around with photos. And now I'm going to launch the camera roll. I'm going to make a method called launch camera roll async. And now I'm going to look up in the docs how to do that. I'm going to use something called image picker. To deal with images and the camera and those kind of things in Expo, there's kind of 2 layers of stuff. There's one thing called image picker, which gives you like a really simple kind of full-featured way to access the camera roll or the camera, but it's full-featured but not customizable at all. So I'm going to show you how to use, or that's not 100% true, but it's like in only very limited ways is it customizable. So if you're trying to build something really, really quickly, or just prototype something, or you just have very basic needs, this can be really useful and easy and quick. But if you want to make something where the camera is like a big focus of the app, or you want to customize the way that it works, or things like that, you'll need to use the camera component, or write your own camera roll component. And so I'm just going to show this image picker thing first, which a lot of people might find useful, and then I'll go into a little bit on the camera stuff. So there's two main things that image picker has: launch image library async, and then launch camera async. I'll do both of them, but we'll start with the launch image library async. We need to ask for permission first. So same thing as we've done a bunch of times before. We'll say await expo permissions ask async expo dot permissions dot camera roll, and let status equal await that. If status isn't granted, then we'll just bail. But otherwise, we'll say expo image picker launch, what was the name of that? Launch image library async. And so right now we'll just launch the image picker. We won't even do anything with the result. Maybe I'll await it. And then I'll just log it. So now, let's make a button that launches this. So we'll say, stick a button here, launch camera roll, on press equals, and we need to import button. So I'll go back down here. And here I'm just going to say this dot launch camera roll async. Cool. And hit the prettier button. So now, now when I tap this, whoa, what did I do? Okay. When I tap this, I should get something logged. Cool. So now I can look at all these different things and choose one of them. But now how can I show that? I'm going to change this to await this because it's an async thing, and this is just what a promise looks like when you log it. So now I'm going to do this again. I'm going to pick a moment. And now I can see I get this object back that has a bunch of metadata. It has a URI, which is a local file, and then has a type, image, canceled false, and then a width and a height. So that's pretty easy. So I'm just going to say, let's add a state thing here, equals chosen image. We'll say it's null to begin with. And then after this camera roll thing, I'll say this.state.chosen image. If it's true-ish, then we'll say let's put an image here. And we'll say the source is this.state.chosen image.uri. And the style will be, well, we could use the height and width of it, or we could just make it something reasonable. So we'll just say height 200, width 200, so it doesn't get too big or take it over, or null. Okay. So now, if I launch the camera roll and choose this picture of me and Nikki, then, oh, I forgot to set state. Instead of logging this, I'm going to say this set state chosen image is image. Okay, so now if I launch camera roll and choose Nikki, now that shows up here. Cool. And so then what I can do is now I can use the launch camera async if I want to. So let's make another button. Let's shrink this down so I can actually see stuff. Let's put another button in here that's like button title equals launch camera. So when you press this, it's going to call this dot launch camera async. So now I have to write this method. So launch camera async. Do the permissions thing again. I'll just copy and paste from here. We actually need different permissions because it's not the camera roll, but we actually need the camera. So I'll just change this. But otherwise, this code is the same. And then instead of the image being from image picker launch image library async, it's going to be from image picker launch camera async. So I'm going to call that. And take an image. OK. So now, if I hit launch camera, now I have a camera. So I can see the handful of you who are here in the audience, or I can flip the camera around and see myself. Cool. So if I take a photo, it'll give me a chance to retake or use the photo. I can say use photo. Now we just did set state, but we don't do anything with that image yet. So one thing you can control here is there's actually a couple options that are sort of interesting here. One of them is allows editing. If I turn on allows editing, I can actually like modify this. So I can like zoom and crop and stuff in different ways. So that's sometimes useful. And so, but now I'm going to basically copy this code here and put the same thing in, except I'm going to choose take an image instead of chosen image. Oops. So now when I launch this, then I'm going to take a picture of me. Do that. Now that shows up here. So now I've gotten an image from the camera and stored it here. One thing that you might notice is, like, to me, this probably looks like a normal selfie, but it actually looks really weird to me because I look like I'm, like when I watch closely, and you'll see that when the camera's open, it's taking it, like, it sort of looks like a mirror to me. But then when it actually returns the photo, it's sort of flipped, which is disorienting if you're like taking the photo. So I kind of like, it's like I'll unbutton my sweatshirt and you can see that like I took CS50 as like backwards in the view that I'm seeing. But here when I take this picture, now it looks readable. And so like we actually want it to be the other way around, I think, for a lot of applications. Sometimes you might not want to, but sometimes you do want to. But let's just practice flipping it around because it's sort of a thing that you commonly want to do, especially when you're using the like selfie camera. And the way we can do that is something called image manipulation. There's a Expo module called image manipulator. And so it takes an array of actions, resize, rotate, flip, crop, et cetera. What we're going to want to do is the flip horizontal. And so I can take this thing after this. We'll just assume we want to do this. And we'll say let image2, or flipped image, equals await expo image manipulator, and then manipulate. And then the first argument is the URI, and so that's just going to be image.uri. And then the actions, it's an array, and the first thing we want it to do is flip, and it takes vertical and horizontal properties. And we want vertical to be false and horizontal to be true. And so then save options is the last argument here. And we can probably just leave this as the default. So now we'll say whatever the result of that is, we'll pass that to take an image. So now, when I go here, when I launch the camera, I'll turn it around to do the selfie thing. And then you can see that this is backwards here, not really readable. I'll take this photo. And now, oh, there's something where it's now been flipped vertically for some reason. So let's just play around with these options and try to figure out why that is. Sometimes there's quirky things with cameras on certain devices. I'm super confused about why this is not flipping this the right way I think it should. Well, I don't know. Sometimes you end up with upside down images, and this is like the real world of dealing with actual devices and things like that. But that is how you flip an image. Cool. So just because we don't have that much time left, I'm going to jump right into using the actual camera component that's much more customizable. And so we basically need to do the same thing where we get permissions for the camera again. So we'll just copy this code, and we'll make another thing that's like launch custom camera async. And then what we'll just say here is, instead of doing anything here, we'll just say custom camera ready true. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to stick, why is this giving me an error? Oh, I forgot to say async here. We're going to actually just stick the camera right after these buttons. We're just going to say this.state custom camera ready and we're just going to actually stick in the camera component. And it's just called expo.camera. So we're going to say expo.camera, style equals width 400, height 400. And type is a sort of a camera constant. There's back and front. So let's pick one of those. Just start. And we'll just say type equals expo.camera.constants. We'll start with front, and we'll maybe do back later. Well, I'll start with back, because that's maybe more normal. So that will just be that. And so then, unexpected token, oops, forgot this, okay. Oh no, okay. Okay. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the custom camera just in component did mount. Did I already define that anywhere? No. Okay. But I'm going to say custom camera ready false, component did mount, this dot launch custom camera async. Okay. So now, actually, there's now a camera component that's just like embedded right in the middle of the app. And so I can do whatever I want with it. It doesn't do anything right now because it doesn't take pictures. It's none of the UI is built out because it's basically like fully customizable. And so you're responsible for putting together all the building blocks of it. So one thing we can do is we can make it flip back and forth between modes just by having you tap on it. So we can say camera type, and we'll start it off by saying Expo camera constants back. And then here, we'll say this dot state dot camera type. So now it's the back camera. But then what we can do is we can make this, make it a highlight, why not? So now I'm using this touchable highlight thing that we used in the video board so that you can touch the camera now. Now I'm just going to make sure that works by adding a log statement here. So now when I do this, if I tap the camera, I can see tap camera showing up here in the logs. So what I'm going to do here is now, instead of that, I'm going to say if this dot state dot camera type equals Expo camera constants back. Oops. This dot set state camera type Expo camera constants front. Else, we'll do the opposite of that and set it to be back. So now tapping this should switch between the front-facing and back-facing camera, or not. This dot state dot camera type is undefined. Huh. I'm not sure why that is. I'll move this out into a method that might solve the problem. I'm super confused why this doesn't work. Okay, so that's getting called. Camera type starts off as something, but now it's somehow undefined. Huh. Okay, well, this is just some sort of weird React thing that I'm confused about. But it actually can happen. And I've done this before when I was practicing for this. So it does work. I'm not sure why it's not working right now. And cool. So just to show that the back face, the other way camera does actually work, I'll just change this default so that it says front. And then now the default here will be, instead of the back-facing camera, it should be front. Huh. Ah. Type front. That was the problem. Forgot this type thing. Okay, so now if I tap it, it flips back and forth. Cool. I don't know what the lesson is there, except that read the documentation closely. And when it says constants.type.back, don't miss the type part. Cool. So there's actually a ton of other APIs that Expo has. So these include push notifications, calendar, gyroscope, accelerometer, pedometer, OpenGL view, which lets you do things like Instagram-like filters and like 3D gaming type stuff with things like Phaser and Pixie, Facebook login and Google login, ads like AdMob, Facebook, fingerprint scanner like Touch ID, or on iPhone 10's Face ID, a secure store, SQLite, and then analytics and stack traces, and then a few other things as well. It's all in the docs.expo.io thing, that site that I've been going to every time I need to look something up. And so this Expo docs is a pretty good augmentation to the normal React Native docs that I'm sure you spend a lot of time looking at whenever you're doing development. And I'm going to put all the code that I was just showing in this repo, github.com/ccheever/Harvard guest lecture. And hopefully I'll put that up in the next hour or so. And so you can refer to it if you want to. And thanks so much for coming and listening. And I hope this helps you build cool stuff that you want to build on your mobile phones. Thanks.